First fringe that the Association of Business Schools has held at the party conferences. We have existed for 20 years, it's 120 years, not that long, 20 years, and we have around 120 members made up of business schools from across the country, but actually including all of the traditional business schools, but even out into some of the new for-profit and not-for-profit private providers. And the main focus of the ABS has been, over the period of its history, really to actually assist our members in actually developing themselves, developing the senior staff that have gone on to actually manage the UK's business schools, and increasingly have gone on to manage business schools around the world, particularly out in Australia and in Asia. So we live within we ourselves have experienced the growth of business and management and its globalisation. But actually, one of the things the association hasn't done is really reflect itself on the development of business and management in the UK and globally, and actually itself try and take, I think, a front foot approach in terms of considering some of the big issues for the business schools themselves, but also how those issues impact more broadly upon the UK as a whole, and as I said, out into the wider international community. So we started the process. We established a policy network back in January of this year for the first time, to get the business schools together to actually start thinking about some of the big issues that there are for the business schools within this much more, I think, vulnerable and uncertain world that has been created by government policy, but also by economic change and actually issues, as I say, in terms of globalisation. But also there are some pretty fundamental issues that face our business schools that actually the association and its members hadn't really started to tackle. And can I just read a couple of quotes from a piece that was published in the Financial Times back in June from Professor Len Shackleton from the University of Buckingham, which I think is probably quite a good starter for Tim. And he said, critics charge that business schools are too detached from business, overly concerned with theory rather than practice. Staff have inadequate experience in the private sector. They are excessively interested in esoteric research from the Research Excellence Framework rather than working with business. They teach too little, and students do not rate their teaching particularly highly. Pedagogical innovation is limited, and there are few sanctions for persistently poor teachers. Employers continue to report dissatisfaction with many business school students they interview. This may be related to low admissions requirements, as Vice Chancellors insist that business schools expand recruitment to cross-subsidise other subjects. Indeed, the overcharging of business students to keep history or arts departments open is a hidden national scandal. And finally, isn't there fundamentally something wrong in many of our business schools having little direct input from business and only often sporadic links with employers? Locating business schools within a university culture of excessive regulation, heavy and backward-looking unionisation, anachronistic contracts and a quasi-medieval calendar does nothing to promote excellence. Let's take business schools out of universities. Teaching students about business is a business in itself, and our institutions should reflect this. So I think what we'd like to have a conversation about today are some of the issues quite clearly that have come out of that piece, but reflecting, I think, in terms of where business schools in the UK are going, where higher education is going generally, issues around, I think, student employability, issues around how we can sustain our postgraduate market, and I think we've got a really good and broad panel here to kick off the conversation. So right down on my left is Baroness Sal Brinton, who is working here in the House of Lords and has over 20 years' experience of working in higher education, and has certainly, like me in my previous life at the 94 Group, had the joys of dealing with a very intense group of institutions and actually trying to steer them in one direction, which is always a joy. Alex Green from the University of Hertfordshire, who was also working with the University Alliance, or just started working with them. And Alex was Tim Wilson's assistant on his review of government business interaction produced over this year. My chair, Angus Lang, the Dean of the Business School at the University of Loughborough, and John Wakeford from UPP, who has been working with the postgraduate, I can't remember the exact title.
Commission.
Yeah, Postgraduate Commission, who is, I think, within the next few weeks just about to publish its findings. And one of the things that David Willits said in the Times Hire last week was that he was concerned there was an issue about postgraduates, but actually he himself felt that the community wasn't coming forward with enough interesting new ideas, and hopefully the Commission may have some ideas. It'd be interesting to see that. So enough from me.